An outbreak of coronavirus infections in the Wuhan province of China in December 2019 is threatening to emerge as the next pandemic. At current count, over 40,000 cases and 600 deaths have been reported in China and over 300 cases in 25 other countries. Unofficial modeling studies by a number of institutions claim infections of over 150,000. The alarming speed of transmission is in part because the virus spreads through the air and by touch. Using the power of 3D medical animation, this video covers what is a pandemic, how this coronavirus is spreading, how coronavirus attacks the body, and what are recommended precautions to take for protecting against epidemics. Pandemics indicate outbreaks of disease that spread to cover an entire region or the world. A pandemic can result in massive loss of life. In the last 100 years, there have been 4 global pandemics, the worst with the 1918 influenza pandemic, resulting in an estimated 50 to 100 million deaths. While no global pandemic has been born from the family of coronavirus, 2 regional epidemics have resulted from this family of viruses. They include severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, and Middle East respiratory syndrome, or MERS, in 2001 to 2003 and 2012 to 2015, respectively, and resulted in over 1,500 deaths. Much is yet to be known about the 2019 novel coronavirus. An early study of 99 infected showed a high mortality of 11%, similar to SARS, and ICU admission rates of 23%. An earlier study described a virus pathology with an 8-day incubation period, a week of infection, followed by a potential escalation to hospitalization and intensive care over another 8 to 10 days. Other indications put the mortality rate closer to 4%. The virus has, as of February 6th, over 40,000 confirmed cases in China alone, with almost 200 cases in over 25 other countries. However, Dr. Jonathan Reed from the UK believes that the numbers of actual cases is far greater and has estimated between 170 to 300,000 by February 9th. This is because symptoms can be mild and escape reporting and testing. What's more, in stark contrast to SARS, some patients may be infectious in their incubation period before the onset of any symptoms. Mechanism of action of coronavirus. The 2019 novel coronavirus is a newly discovered strain from the coronavirus family that causes respiratory disease. Humans have long been infected by coronavirus, as it is one of those responsible for the common cold. It is a contagious viral infection spread through inhalation or ingestion of viral droplets. As a result, coughing and sneezing and touching infected surfaces are primary sources of infection. The structure of coronavirus has multiple parts. Inside the virus lies the genetic encoding that allows the virus to hijack human cells and turn them into virus factories. A protein encapsulates the genetic material known as the viral envelope. On the surface of the viron are S and HE proteins. The structure of the 2019 novel coronavirus is a mutation. For more information on this, see the link below. The large S glycoproteins are used by the virus to gain entry to human cells. They most likely attach to angiotensin-converting enzyme 2 receptors on the cell membrane, allowing the virus entry. The exact mechanism for this is not known. Most likely, as shown here, the human cell ingests the virus in a process known as endocytosis. Once inside the cytoplasm, the endosome opens to reveal the virus's genetic material, a single-stranded RNA. The virus hijacks the cell's machinery to replicate the RNA in N proteins and uses the endoplasmic reticulum to form its M protein outer layer and the all-important S protein. After replication, the virus is carried by the Golgi bodies out of the cell in a process known as exocytosis, so that it can infect other cells. Meanwhile, the stress of viral production on the endoplasmic reticulum eventually leads to apoptosis, or cell death. It should be noted that the mechanism of action for 2019 novel coronavirus is unknown. However, scientists in China have sequenced the genome, while others have used the sequencing to visualize the structure. There is currently no cure or vaccine for the 2019 novel coronavirus, and treatment is only supportive. Therefore, preventing transmission is paramount. As an airborne virus, recommended precautions are similar to those for preventing the flu. This includes washing hands regularly with soap and water for 20 seconds, covering sneezes and coughs with the inside of the elbow, refraining from touching high-contact surfaces like railings and doorknobs. If you use tissues, throw them away immediately. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. For more info on precautions and best practices, see the list of references below. The pandemic risk of the novel coronavirus is very real. However, biology has advanced greatly in the 15 years since SARS, and so has communication between biologists and governments. China has taken monumental efforts to contain the spread of the virus. Also, some existing and experimental drugs are offering hope for treating the infection and improving outcomes. But even still, infection control habits remain paramount if humanity is to stave off a full pandemic. For further information, see the resources listed here.
So the mass panic, global economic shutdown, halted way of life, these are some of the adverse effects of global pandemic and dismantled so many aspects of humanity. You may think that with our advanced technologies we can easily mitigate this. However, we need to take into account what we must sacrifice to overcome this. First, we need to know what really is COVID-19. According to the World Health Organization, it is an infectious disease caused by a new virus that had not been previously identified in humans. This virus causes respiratory illness. Furthermore, it is characterized by mild symptoms including a runny nose, sore throat, cough, and fever. Along with widespread infection, global economies will be taking a massive hit. Factories, companies, businesses will have to shut down due to the depressed human activity. What does it entail? Not only will those business lose money, their workers will lose the livelihood that they need to feed their families. On the other hand, the stock market has been plummeting since the rise of the pandemic. It wiped out 16 trillion US dollars from global stock markets in just 52 days. It has its lowest level since the 2008 to 2009 global financial crisis. So, the global societies are experiencing many adversities. Mass panic has taken its toll on global resources with individuals hoarding supplies and produce. The underprivileged are suffering with the result of the mass panic. Not only are they suffering financially, they are at high risk at infection. With their highly unsanitary communities, third world countries especially will be affected. With highly urbanized areas and relentless slums, infection is at high risk. Global institutions will be experience major holes. Religious institution has always been large-scale congregations of people at the same place. This pandemic has put stop to that. People are becoming more uncomfortable, will not go into church on Sundays. Religious sites are even barren of human activity. Security also has been void to give way for health concerns. As of now, which may be a good thing because almost all countries are focusing on the pandemic. Well, COVID-19 virus disease is a serious. It is officially a global pandemic. So the mass panic, global economic shutdown, halted way of life, these are some of the adverse effects of global pandemic and dismantled so many aspects of humanity. You may think that with our advanced technologies we can easily mitigate this. However, we need to take into account what we must sacrifice to overcome this. First, we need to know what really is COVID-19. According to the World Health Organization, it is an infectious disease caused by a new virus that had not been previously identified in humans. This virus causes respiratory illness. Furthermore, it is characterized by mild symptoms including a runny nose, sore throat, cough, and fever. Along with widespread infection, global economies will be taking a massive hit. Factories, companies, businesses will have to shut down due to the depressed human activity, and it has already disrupted many facets of our lives, encompassing work, school, and entertainment. While it is too early to determine the long-term impact of this crisis, I am confident in saying that this crisis will trigger drastic changes in our lifestyle going forward.
It was New Year's Eve 2019 when health officials in China admitted they had a problem.
Health authorities have activated their most serious response level
after an outbreak of a new type of viral pneumonia
in central China.
A rapidly growing number of people were developing a dry cough and fever before getting pneumonia. And for some, it turned fatal. Doctors have named the disease COVID-19, or coronavirus disease 2019, indicating that a type of virus is causing the illness. When they tried to trace its origin, they found a likely source: this food market in Wuhan. Out of the first 41 patients, 27 had been here. It wasn't conclusive evidence, but Chinese officials quickly shut down the market. They had seen this happen before at a place just like this.
Health officials are trying to get a grip on an alarming outbreak of SARS.
The virus originated in mainland China.
Has spread across the country.
The disease had been festering for months in southern China.
In 2002, a coronavirus had emerged at a very similar market in southern China. It eventually reached 29 countries and killed nearly 800 people. Now, 18 years later, this coronavirus is in at least 71 countries and has already killed over 3,100 people. So what do these markets have to do with the coronavirus outbreak, and why is it happening in China? A lot of the viruses that make us sick actually originate in animals. Some of the viruses that cause the flu come from birds and pigs. HIV/AIDS comes from chimpanzees. The deadly Ebola virus likely originates in bats. And in the case of the 2019 coronavirus, there's some evidence it went from a bat to a pangolin before infecting a human. While viruses are very good at jumping between species, it's rare for a deadly one to make this journey all the way to humans. That's because it would need all these hosts to encounter each other at some point. That's where the Wuhan market comes in. It's a wet market. A kind of place where live animals are slaughtered and sold for consumption.
It was not a surprise at all, and I think that it was not a surprise to many scientists.
Peter Lee is a professor and expert on China's animal trade.
The cages stacked above one over another. Animals at the bottom are often soaked with all kinds of liquid, animal excrement, pus, blood, or whatever the liquid they're receiving from the animals above.
That's exactly how a virus can jump from one animal to another. If that animal then comes in contact with or is consumed by a human, the virus could potentially infect them. And if the virus then spreads to other humans, it causes an outbreak. Wet markets are scattered all over the world, but the ones in China are particularly well known because they offer a wide variety of animals, including wildlife. This is a sample menu reportedly from the market in Wuhan. These animals are from all over the world, and each one has the potential to carry its own viruses to the market. The reason all these animals are in the same market is because of a decision China's government made decades ago. Back in the 1970s, China was falling apart. Famine had killed more than 36 million people, and the communist regime, which controlled all food production, was failing to feed its more than 900 million people. In 1978, on the verge of collapse, the regime gave up this control and allowed private farming. While large companies increasingly dominated the production of popular foods like pork and poultry, some smaller farmers turned to catching and raising wild animals as a way to sustain themselves.
At the very beginning, it was mostly peasant household backyard operation of turtles, for example. That's how wildlife farming started to get off the ground.
And since it started to feed and sustain people, the Chinese government backed it.
So it was imperative for the government to encourage people to make a living through whatever productive activities they can find themselves in. You can lift yourself out of poverty No matter what you are doing, that's okay.
But then in 1988, the government made a decision that changed the shape of wildlife trade in China. They enacted the Wildlife Protection Law, which designated the animals as resources owned by the state and protected people engaged in the utilization of wildlife resources.
That's one of the most devastating problems of the law, because if you designate the wildlife as a natural resource, that means it is something you can use for human benefits.
The law also encouraged the domestication and breeding of wildlife. And with that, an industry was born. Small local farms turned into industrial-sized operations. For example, this bear farm started with just 3 and eventually grew to more than 1,000 bears. Bigger populations meant greater chances that a sick animal could spread disease. Farmers were also raising a wide variety of animals, which meant more viruses on the farms. Nonetheless, these animals were funneled into the wet markets for profit. While this legal wildlife farming industry started booming, it simultaneously provided cover for an illegal wildlife industry. Endangered animals like tigers, rhinoceroses, and pangolins were trafficked into China. By the early 2000s, these markets were teeming with wild animals when the inevitable happened.
The latest on the deadly SARS virus, the worldwide death toll up again today.
China has reported more than 1,400 cases of infection nationwide.
It is what health officials have feared all along.
In 2003, the SARS outbreak was traced to a wet market here in southern China. Scientists found traces of the virus in farmed civet cats. Chinese officials quickly shut down the markets and banned wildlife farming. But just a few months after the outbreak, the Chinese government declared 54 species of wildlife animals, including civet cats, legal to farm again. By 2004, the wildlife farming industry was worth an estimated 100 billion yuan, and it exerted significant influence over the Chinese government.
Wildlife farming industry was tiny in China's gigantic GDP, but the industry has enormous lobbying capability.
It's because of this influence that the Chinese government has allowed these markets to grow over the years. In 2016, for example, the government sanctioned the farming of some endangered species like tigers and pangolins. By 2018, the wildlife industry had grown to 148 billion yuan and had developed clever marketing tactics to keep the markets around.
The industry has been promoting these wildlife animals as tonic products, as bodybuilding, as sex enhancing, and of course as disease fighting. None of the claims can hold water.
Yet these products became popular with an influential portion of China's population.
The majority of the people in China do not eat wildlife animals. Those people who consume these wildlife animals are the rich and the powerful, a small minority.
It's this minority that the Chinese government chose to favor over the safety of the rest of its population.
These parochial commercial interests of small number of wildlife eaters are hijacking China's national interest.
Soon after the coronavirus outbreak, the Chinese government shut down thousands of wet markets and temporarily banned wildlife trade again. Organizations around the world have been urging China to make the ban permanent. Chinese social media, in particular, has been flooded with petitions to ban it for good this time. In response, China is reportedly amending the wildlife protection law that encouraged wildlife farming decades ago. But unless these actions lead to a permanent ban on wildlife farming, outbreaks like this one are bound to happen again. For a bunch more information about China's wet markets, viruses, and wildlife, we have an episode on our Netflix show called The Next Pandemic Explained. It talks about why a coronavirus could spark the next pandemic and what the world's experts are doing to stop it. That's on our Netflix show Explained. Check it out.